Welcome back. In this video, we'll explore how to create a single-page Xamarin Forms application, writing the UI in C#. Let's start out by taking a look at the app that's running on my iOS simulator here. We see that we have the Xamarin icon here at the top. Below that, we have a multi-line text box where we can type in anything we want. And below that, we have a couple buttons, save and delete, which actually aren't doing anything just yet. So let's take a look at the code to see how we implemented this UI, and let's add in that button functionality. So here in the code, I have created a class called MainPage that is inheriting from a Xamarin Forms content page. Now in Xamarin Forms, a content page is a page that fills up the entire screen. And on that page, we can put any UI element we want, and we can arrange it in whatever order we want. So let's see how we did that below. The first thing I've done, I've created a couple fields or global variables for my UI elements. The first one being an image for my Xamarin image. The next one being an editor, which is what Xamarin Forms calls a multi-line text box. Next is a label, which is an uneditable piece of text that will appear on the screen. And this label is where we will save our notes here at the bottom. And then for our buttons, we have our save button and our delete button. Now in the constructor of MainPage, I've defined the background color as one of the built-in colors called powder blue. So that's how we get this nice blue background. And then next, I initialize my image. So for the Xamarin Forms image, I assign the source to a PNG file that we've added to our Android and iOS projects. We next initialize the editor, and we specify a couple values like this placeholder. This placeholder is the text that appears when there's no text in the editor. So we see now it says enter note, but as soon as I type in hello world, hello Q world, that placeholder goes away. We've defined the background color as white to ensure this text box stands out against the blue background, and we've given it we've assigned its margin to a thickness of 10. Now margin tells this UI element how much spacing to keep between itself and its neighbor. So by setting this to 10, we're telling it to have 10 pixels or 10 points of spacing between the top, the left, the bottom, and the right. We next initialize our buttons. So we have our save button and our delete button, assigning their text colors, their background colors, and their margins as well. And lastly, we initialize our label, where we set its font size and also its margin with a thickness of 10. Now once we have all of our UI elements defined, we have to lay them out on the page. Xamarin Forms has a few different layouts, and for this example, we're going to use a grid. A grid allows us to define a set of columns and rows, and once we have those columns and rows defined, we can put our UI elements anywhere we want in the grid. Let's take a look. With our column definition here, we've defined two columns. Both have equal width using this grid unit type of star. Now what star means, star tells Xamarin Forms to keep these two columns proportional to each other. So by saying 1 star and 1 star, we're telling Xamarin Forms we want these columns to be the same width. And this is nice because no matter what the size of the user's screen, whether they're on a tablet, a phone, or a phone with maybe a higher resolution, these two columns will always be equally proportionate to each other. If I were to change this to 2 star, well now this column 0, will always be twice as wide as column 1. There are other options we have for our grid unit type, such as absolute. Absolute will define an exact pixel or point density. So if we wanted column 0 to be 200 pixels, we could tell it to use grid unit type absolute and set that value to 200. And the third option is auto. Auto actually ignores this value. It doesn't matter what we put in for our number anymore because auto will size the column depending on whatever UI element we put into it, which is nice. It makes it a little easier for us, but there is a little bit of a performance impact because anytime we update what's in that column, it will have to resize itself. So for now, let's leave this as 1 star. Likewise with our rows, we've defined 4 rows here, all proportional to each other using grid unit type star. And we can see on our app with the rows that row 0, because it's grid unit type star of 1, it's a little bit smaller than row 1, which is a value of 2.5. Likewise with row 3 being 1 and the last row being 2. You can see the different sizes here in the app. So the grid's defined. Now we can add our UI elements to it, and we do that by saying grid.children.add, and we first put in our Xamarin image. So that Xamarin image, we're putting it in column 0, row 0. And because we want this Xamarin image to be centered, we tell it to span across both columns. So by saying set column span to 2, this image will now be centered across both columns. Next, we add in our node editor to column 0, row 1. This will also span across 2 columns. And our save button goes into column 0, row 2, and delete button into column 1, row 2. Lastly, we add in our text label. That's going to be the label that saves our note once we're done writing it and tap save. And that goes into column 0, row 3, spanning across 2 columns. Now, we saw earlier that the buttons aren't working. So let's add in that functionality by taking advantage of the clicked event. So in Xamarin Forms, every button has an event called clicked, and this event will fire every time the user taps on the button. So by subscribing to the clicked event, we can take action anytime a user taps on our buttons. So likewise with delete button, let's subscribe to clicked. And down below, we now have these 2 methods where we can enter in any code we want whenever the user taps on a button. So when the user taps on the delete button, I want to clear everything out. I want to set the labels text to just be an empty string. So clear out anything that might already be in there. And likewise with the editor, our node editor's text will also clear that as well. And then when the user taps on the save button, what we want to do is save the value of the note editor into our label. So to do that, we can set the text label's text to be equal to the note editor's text. So now, anytime the user taps the save button, our value should appear down below. So let's run this code and see what happens. Okay, so now if I type in hello world, and I click save, there we go. We see our saved value down in our label, just like we expect from our save button click handler. And likewise, when we tap delete, everything goes away. Thanks so much for joining me. Stay tuned for the next video where we learn how to implement the MVVM architecture into our single page Xamarin Forms application.